Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I want to say thank you so much. And also, this is the first time, usually when I'm speaking to crowds, I'm looking straight ahead. So this is the first time that I'm looking side to side. So if I seem that I'm looking more towards one side than the other side, please just holler at me and let me know. But I want to thank you guys so much for being here today, being attentive, and listening to a little bit of my story. First, there are a couple people here that I know, so if I know you, if you could please raise your hand. Don't make me say your names. Hello. I call this out because throughout today, in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about a very special person in my life who really was influential to making me who I am today. And so that person would be Miss Stephanie Bolduc, who is one of the reasons I am here today. So let's give her a big round of applause. We all know her and love her, I'm sure. So as mentioned, my name is Joanna Kelley. I go by mostly Joe. I own Cup of Joe in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. How many of you guys have been there? Oh, see, that's a little bit more, so that's great. How many of you are going to go there now after this Tom Talk? And that is a pressure point. You should all have your hands up right now, guys. Awesome. So I started Cup of Joe roughly 6 years ago. My goal was really to create a fully inclusive space that everyone felt fully comfortable to be themselves at. I've been in the restaurant world since I was about 13. I started as a dishwasher and then worked my way up to a bartender, a waitress, and then left the hospitality world because, like a lot of people, I felt like there wasn't a real career, lifelong career in that. So then I went to the corporate world and did marketing and store design, kind of overall some boring stuff for a larger company called Verizon Wireless. And so I worked all over New England. And after about 5 years of that, I felt really kind of in a rut. Like, what am I going to do with my life? This isn't inspiring to me. This isn't also giving me the freedoms I want in life. I love to travel. I've been to Europe a bunch. I've been to Africa, South America. And I really wanted the freedom that wasn't given to me in a typical 9 to 5. So I quit. I did something that, as you guys will learn, any financial advisor would tell you not to do, and most likely your parents would tell you not to do. I cashed out all of my life savings, all of my retirement, and every penny I had, and decided that I was going to open my own business. The funny thing is, I don't drink coffee. I know, it's kind of crazy. I've actually never had a full cup of coffee. I'm sure to some of you in here, you can't start your day without your iced coffee or your latte. And I thank you for that because that allows me to pay my bills. But for me, coffee is a foreign taste for me. I'm not really in love with it. But when you're starting your own business and you're thinking about what you want to do, a lot of times you look at what the market needs. And I saw a gap in Portsmouth. I saw a community that was looking for a place to gather. Portsmouth, like Dover and like the Seacoast, is rapidly expanding and kind of, to some people, losing its sense of home and community. And so I thought, well, what better than kind of like a friends-ish coffee shop? And we're also a bar, which most of you cannot partake in. So it's really kind of cool. It's a place that, at 7 in the morning, people are there with their laptops doing work throughout the afternoon. And then at night, we have like live music and open mic nights and all different types of events. So again, I really wanted to create a place that everyone could go to and everyone could feel welcomed. But it took me a long way to get there. I grew up in Rochester, some of you know it, and I grew up as what we would call a ward of the state. I assume none of you really know what a ward of the state is. So ward of the state means that I grew up with neither of my parents. I grew up primarily with my grandparents, but in and out of some foster homes. I actually lived on and off for a period at Dover Children's Home also. So I grew up with a very lack of stability, lack of continuity. As many of us know, our parents are very fundamental in who we are in life. And so when you grow up without them, you kind of spend a lot of time trying to understand who you are, where you come from, and what you're made of. Because a lot of those things we inherit directly from the time that we spend with our parents and our families. And so when you don't have them, you can get a little shaky. And that was me. When I graduated from high school, I was the first person in my family to ever get accepted to college, and then had to drop out because I didn't have enough money to finish. I didn't want to put myself in such a financial pickle that I wasn't able to survive. So then I was working, like I said, I was working as a bartender, working as a waitress, just trying to survive. There was a good chunk of my life, I would say up until probably the last 5 years, that I've spent in this mode of surviving, right? Compared to like when you guys are practicing for the playoffs or your finals or college admissions, right? You're gonna really gotta get through this mode, and you can't really think about what's gonna happen past that. So when you grow up in a really unstable environment, that's kind of the mindset you're in. It's so hard to picture the future because you just are so uncertain of it. So you focus in the then and the now. The problem with that is when you're not thinking about the future, when you're not focusing on the future, you're not planning for the future. So again, at some point I was like, what am I gonna do with my life? I have no idea. And then I landed my job, which I do not recommend this, but I will tell you, I lied on my resume. Again, I do not recommend it. But to me, I needed to do something. I knew that I had the skill set to do the job that I was applying for. I just didn't have the degree. And I thought to myself, why should that hold me back? Why should I be penalized for something that was no fault of my own? It wasn't my fault that I grew up without parents. It wasn't my fault that I grew up in the system. It wasn't my fault I didn't have anyone to guide me through the college process and therefore didn't know how to afford it. And so I got the job, and a couple years into the job when I was given a promotion, I was out to dinner with one of my bosses, and I said, Anthony, I gotta break it to you. And he said, what, Joe? And I said, I lied on my resume. I figured at this point I was doing a good enough job that I was getting a promotion that the likelihood they were gonna fire me was pretty slim to none. And he laughed and took a pause and said, I know. I knew the day that I looked over your resume. I knew when we went and called references, you can check these things, Joe. And I said, well, then why did you hire me? And he said, because I saw the tenacity and I saw the need that you had. Because a lot of times when people are in need, they work a little harder. When you need to get that A on that exam, when you need to make it to finals, when you need that scholarship, when there's a fire behind you, you're committed to success. So that happened. And it's something I joke about now, but a lot of times when I'm younger, like when I was your guys' age, I was so embarrassed of the things that weren't my fault. I was so embarrassed of not being able to afford the prom dress that I wanted. I was embarrassed of not being able to afford the senior pictures I wanted, not being able to get a car, not being able to get a license, not having the things that all of my friends had. That oftentimes I would just shy away from the conversation of accepting that those things aren't my fault, but I have the ability to create a different future. So fast forward a little bit. Like I said, I opened Cup of Joe it was actually 6 years ago this month, which is really cool. After that, I started really getting involved in the community. So rewinding a little bit, as I said, I know Mrs. Bolduc here. So how I know her is I actually met her when I was 7 years old. Who here has heard of the program Big Brothers, Big Sisters? A lot of you guys have. So what that is a program where somebody in the community is paired or matched with a younger person in the community. Usually it is someone who, like me, who grew up in relative poverty, that really need a role model, need someone to reach out. Because like I said, I didn't grow up with my parents. And so, when I was 7 years old, I was matched with Stephanie as my big. And gosh, I'm so, if any of you guys have met her and spent time with her, you know how absolutely blessed I am. And so Stephanie went above and beyond in this program, and her family did. They really took me in, really treated me like their own. And within that, they're such good people that they give back to the community. A lot of times, we think about what we can do for ourselves, but it's really what we can do for others that mark who we are as people. And so when you are, blessed with a good life and a stable life, you should be giving back to your community to raise everyone up. And that's exactly what Steph and her family did. And so because of that, I learned at a very young age that it was so important to give back. And especially because I knew that I would not be in the positions that I am in today without that influence. So I myself became a big, now like 7 years ago. And again, it was so important to me because Stephanie was a clear indication to me that one person can change your life. One positive interaction can send you on a different path. I always say to people when I go around and kind of tell my story, a big part of life is you can't be what you don't see. You know what I mean? If you don't see healthy relationships, it's hard to form them. If you don't see healthy friendships, you don't know what a marker is. If you don't see success, if you don't see people going to college, if you don't see certain things, they're like fantasies, right? They're not tangible or real. And so one person extending a hand to me changed my life. And because of that, I felt indebted to do the same. So a few years ago, I started an organization called Cultivate. Probably none of you have ever heard of it, and that is okay. In Cultivate, one of our main programs that we started 3 years ago is the New England BIPOC Festival. Who here knows what BIPOC stands for? Okay. Hopefully, by the end of this, more hands will go up. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. So our motto is that communities are made of communities. And what we do, we're like a multicultural festival, much like the Greek Festival or the Boat Festival or Apple Harvest Day. What we do is create a community, an event, where we bring thousands of people together and highlight people of color within our own community. So all of the restaurants, like, what's a good example? Who's ever been to Vida Cantina? It's a great place. So Dave Vargas, who's the chef and owner of Vida Cantina, started this program with me and this festival with me. And so he's Mexican, so we wanted to highlight his restaurant. And then we also highlight other restaurants throughout all of New England. When we first started in 2021, we had about 20 vendors and 700 people attend. Last year, we had 56 vendors and almost 3,000 people attend. This year, our goal is 5,000 people in 75 different vendors. And so part of that is what I do is reach out to all of these different people and across all cultural lines in New England and say, hey, come to our festival and show people who you are. So a good example is that is we bring the indigenous peoples of New Hampshire, and they do our opening prayer and do our land acknowledgement. And then this year we'll have several different tribes there from throughout New England, and to bring in a powwow element to that. We also have the Indonesian Cultural Center, and they do teach Indonesian cultural dances, and we have the Vietnamese Center of Boston, and all of these organizations. Because it's so important, as you guys know, one glaring fact about me is I'm Black, I'm biracial. And growing up in New Hampshire, it can be a very isolating experience to be one of the only people of color in your home. And so it was so important for us to bridge the gaps of that, to remind people that while it may be rare to see somebody who isn't white in your school, in your class, around you, that people of color have existed in New Hampshire dating back to the colonies. And so for us, it's so important that we're elevating those voices and making sure that people have a space to be seen and to be heard. Because we're seeing, unfortunately, in New Hampshire, a rise of hate crimes. The New Hampshire District Attorney actually just released a study that hate-related crimes are up 418% since 2017. So I'm sure we've all seen them on the news, heard about them through people. So it's more than ever, it's so important that we remember that diversity is key to elevating everyone in our community. And that it's so important to very much in the New Hampshire spirit, right? And especially the Seacoast spirit, to be welcoming and to be open of other people and things that we don't know. And so within that realm, we again started this organization and this festival, and it's really cool. It's an all-day festival, and people come in, and we really try to make things as accessible as possible to every single social economic group. So it's free to attend, and all of the restaurants have all of this different food, And there's tons of activities, wicked family friendly. And this year we're expanding, and we hope to be so much bigger that we're actually going to be at Strawberry Bank. How many of you guys have ever been to Strawberry Bank? So you know how big, when you first walk in there, there's that giant open field? So we're going to be taking that over this year. I'm actually a trustee, which is just a board member of Strawberry Bank. And so it's so cool for me to like join these two organizations together. Because again, there's a long history of multiculturalism in New Hampshire and in the Seacoast. And so I feel like it's my job to rise up that voice. Now, another thing that was touched on is that I am the assistant mayor in Portsmouth. So I was first elected in 2021 as one of the youngest women ever and the only African American to ever sit on the city council in Portsmouth. I'm actually the first ever African American in the whole state of New Hampshire to ever hold this role on a city or any municipal or town level, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? 2024 and the first Black person ever is being elected to a position in our state. It's kind of wild. So I first ran for city council because a couple things. There were no young people. Well, I'm older than you guys. I'm still younger than a lot of people in the room. But when you walk into a political room, you know, I'm younger, I'm the youngest by sometimes 50 years. So I felt like who in my government represents me? Who in my government is a small business owner? Who in my government has gone through the struggles that I've gone through? Who in my government looks like me, has the same ideas as me? And I wasn't seeing myself represented in my government, which is one of the key points to getting involved, is in making sure that your interests, the things that you care about, the things that you want to see in 10, 20 years is being articulated. So while I won in 2021, the first time I actually ran was 2019 and I lost. So in Portsmouth, we do kind of a popular choice election. So whoever gets the most votes becomes mayor, the second most votes becomes assistant mayor, the next 7 become the city council. So it's a total of 9 seats. So in 2021, I was a random person that most people only knew as like serving their beer at a bar or their coffee at my coffee shop. Literally one person wrote in an article, "Why is the waitress practicing politics?" Which is a funny play and a very great song. So in that election in 2019, I lost. I came in number 10 by 55 votes, which was soul crushing at one point, but also inspired me that so many people in my community who I had never met would vote for me. You know what I mean? Had decided that they are comfortable enough to put their faith in me to lead our city, put their trust in me that I would not abandon the things and the values that I hold dear and that I campaigned on. So in 2020, there was the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement in New Hampshire. And through that, I became elevated as kind of a spokesperson in New Hampshire to discuss some of the racial tension and social justice issues that we had in our state. I threw one of the biggest rallies in Portsmouth, had about 5,000 people, started kind of doing speaking engagements to talk about what we can do to just be better people, to be open people, to be honest with some of the issues that we have going on in our state. Because like I said, I've lived here my whole life, I was born here, I never want to leave. But you can criticize the things you love. And I felt like as a Granite Stater, it was my right to say, hey, we're not doing things as well as we could be. So when I thought that was it, I thought that was going to be enough for me. I was going to do these rallies, I was going to do some speaking engagements, I was going to do that type of work. And again, in 2021, when I looked at the slate of candidates who were running, again, nobody looked like me. Nobody was working a job like I was. Nobody was talking about some of the long-term strategic plans that I wanted for our community, like more outdoor dining, better bike lanes, childcare, affordable housing. You know, not enough people were talking about them. So I decided on one of the very last days that you can sign up again. And again, in that time, I got elected as assistant mayor. So I went from number 10, loser, to number 2. So not necessarily first place, but it was a great boost to my confidence. And again, so moving that my community really felt that they were connected to me and trusted me. And then we had kind of a crazy crazy year. Your first year when you get elected, your biggest responsibility is the budget, which is not that fun to talk about, but it's a really intricate part of government, right? I always say, show me your budget and you're showing me your values. So if you care about the longevity of your community and its youth, you're really invested in schools and things like that. If you care about the social economic equality in your community, you're really invested in affordable housing and multi-means of transportation. You're looking at the long-term strategic plan of climate change, of structural integrity, and of a growing population. And then in 2023, we had another election. So in New Hampshire, town and city elections are every 2 years, just like our House of Representatives and our state senator and our governor. So basically, your first year, you're trying to learn what you do. Your second year, you're trying to get things through, and then by the end of it, you could be out of office. So in 2023, luckily for me, I was elected again as assistant mayor. This time, closing the gap just a little bit more between the mayor and myself, but he still beat me a little bit. And in a historic election, in Portsmouth at least, every single city councilor was reelected. Our records go back, our easily accessible records go back to 1929, and never in the history of Portsmouth that we could easily access had a city council been unanimously reelected. So again, as we're here pushing some of the things that are important to us, affordable housing and workforce, and making sure that everyone has access to our community, it was again a reminder that our community trusted our thoughts, trusted me to help lead them. So some of the really fun things I get to do as a city councilor are things like this: come to schools and talk to people and try to get people and kids to understand that you are a vital part of your government even before you can vote. And you're even more of a vital part of your government once you turn 18 and you should be voting. I get to do really cool things like go to elementary schools and serve my community in like several different ways. Make sure that everyone has a voice at the table, because there's so many people that feel that the government is unobtainable to them. What I think is one of the coolest parts about my two worlds colliding, owning the coffee shop and being the assistant mayor, is that I still work at my coffee shop. So there's so many days of the week that I'm sitting there making a latte for somebody or a macchiato, and they say to me like, "Aren't you the assistant mayor?" I'm like, "Yeah, do you have any questions? I have a couple minutes, I can sit down and talk to you." And so it's really nice, and I talk about this all the time with other counselors, is that I get to talk to people in such a casual way that a lot of government officials or elected officials don't get to do. Because I get to just have these quick exchanges of like, you want to complain about something? That's okay. You want to say thanks about something? That's even better. If you have a question, I'm here to answer. And so it's really nice to be not an elitist. I always say that there's some people that are born and bred to be in politics. We kind of see them sometimes, right? Their grandfather was in politics, their dad was in politics, their uncle was. I always joke that that was the mayor. His dad was in politics. His aunt was one of the first female mayors in Portsmouth. He went to Phillips Exeter, then he went to Yale, and he knew he wanted to be a politician. And I stumbled out of a coffee shop and onto the dais. And so there's sometimes this learning curve with it. But as I wrap up, because I think we're almost there, I just like to leave everyone with a reminder that it's okay to not know what you want to do. It's okay to not know what track your life is going to be on, and it's okay to switch your mind and to switch what choices you want. I say all the time, I don't know what's next for me. Maybe I run for Congress. Maybe I quit politics and open another cup of joe. Maybe I quit it all and go sail the 7 seas. But that's okay, because for me, again, it took me so long to go from surviving and just getting through the day, right? Getting through, what am I gonna eat? What am I gonna wear? Where am I gonna sleep? What's the next day hold for me? To getting to a place in life where you can finally breathe, you can finally take a minute, pat yourself on the back and say, you've done really good, and if this is as much as you get, that's great. Because at least for me, to tell you that I never expected to be sitting in a room with all of you guys paying some very good attention, like thank you so much for that. But for me, it's always a different moment in time, because I never expected this to be my life. And so I thank you all so much for paying attention, and I think that's it. Thank you so much.